So thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez, for joining us today. I'm just going to give a brief overview for all of you guys who don't know who he is or just want to learn more about him. So he was born in Goa and lived in Africa for 10 years and went to secondary school in Wandsworth, and then qualified from King's College London and Charing Cross and Westminster Medical School in 1987. He has been a GP at Parchmore Medical Centre in Thornton Heath for 30 years, and he's also a GP trainer and a governor at the Royal Russell School in Croydon. He's the chair of the Croydon Borough Committee of South West London CCG, and he's also the chair of the London Integrated Urgent Care Governance Group, which oversees basically the quality and the governance of the NHS 111 and the integrated working with the GP out of hours service and the London Ambulance Service across London. Also, he is a fellow of the Royal College of General Practitioners and is a chairman of the National Clinical Governance Group involving representatives of all the Royal Medical Colleges in the UK, which oversees the clinical evidence for the medicine underpinning the NHS pathways used by some of the ambulance services and the NHS 111 in England. And finally, he was also awarded the MBE for services to medicine and healthcare by Her Majesty the Queen, becoming the first Croydon GP to have received this honor. So it's amazing that we have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Epiphany. Can I just first of all say up front, I'm not going to have the answers to all the questions, but I'm sure we can find a way of getting some answers for you in terms of what we know. But I suppose the first thing to say is we're all in this together, and the very fact that we've got so many people on the call today shows there's a huge interest in this topic, and you know, given that we're all locked down in tier 4, our lives and the way we conduct it, how we see our families has all been affected in a major way. Christmas has been disrupted, and we are in a difficult situation as individuals, as families, as communities. And it is a pivotal time in our history, in the history of this pandemic, and also in terms of where we are. The fact that such draconian measures have had to be taken kind of says to us that we have to take this really seriously. And is there a way out? And we can only do that if we do that together. So there's only one way out of this, and that's through vaccination. Lockdowns will suppress the virus for a while, but as soon as you remove lockdown, as we've all seen, the numbers start to rise again. And now with a new variant of the coronavirus, which is more infectious than the previous one, 70% more infectious, and numbers in Croydon going up 3 to 4 times, doubling every 3 to 4 days, we've got a major issue in terms of London. Just last week, it was about 60% of new infections were this new variant. I'm sure it's gone up higher. So this is a real situation that we need to take seriously and think about how we're going to get out of it, because we don't want to be in this situation forever. As the Secretary of State says, we might need to be in this for a while. You know, how long is a while? It could be weeks, it could be months, and going in and out of lockdown is not what any of us on this call would want. So it's really about, what do we understand about the disease, and what do we understand about the vaccines, and that's what we're going to cover today. But the key issue here is we're all in this together. We don't all have the answers. We have more questions than answers, but we can only do and get out of this together. There's no way that any one person or any one group of people can solve this problem. And just to say, we will get through this, and we will get through the other side, and we will have life back to normal. And a lot of the journey is going to be about information, and information is power. And it's important that people get the information from the right sources, because there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of conspiracy theories, and all sorts of fake news that people pick up from social media and WhatsApp groups and the like. So I would say to people, make sure that you look at the right sources of information. And some of my roles that were just outlined actually is about looking at the evidence base and seeing what real evidence there is, rather than hearsay or fake news that's circulating. So in terms of where we are now, our only way of getting out of this situation is by mass vaccination. And we're fortunate in that we have one vaccine already available to us, and I'll come back to how it works and the misinformation about it. And we've got another one on its way, and another one yet to be passing the regulations. Now, the first thing that people say is, have corners being cut to have these vaccines? The answer to that is an unequivocal no. So what's happened is that every stage has been followed exactly the way it would do for any vaccine. What's different is that more money has been made available. The bureaucracy has been removed in between every stage, where people had to apply for funding, apply for licenses to do trials, and those are the things that took a long time. But actually, all the science, all the actual clinical trials were done in the right way, and they've been peer reviewed. And the evidence that we have for anything that we do in medicine has to be peer reviewed, and the evidence has to be kosher, and it has to stand up to scrutiny. So the first vaccine, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, was first approved in the UK by the MHRA, the regulator. It has now been approved by the European Medicines Association agency as well, and also the FDA in America. So these are all independent experts who've looked at all the evidence to say, is this safe? Is this effective? And that should give us real confidence that, 3 different regulatory groups who are very meticulous in the way they scrutinize evidence have come to this conclusion and have approved the vaccine for use in their countries and in Europe in particular in the last few days. So why is there some controversy? So we've had vaccines for decades, and if it wasn't for vaccines, some of us wouldn't be here. So we take it for granted that we don't have anyone with polio. Polio was eradicated off the planet just recently. You probably heard that in the news. We used to have smallpox. I'm not old enough to remember smallpox, but smallpox used to affect a huge number of people. And only because of the vaccine that it was eradicated. And we all in our childhoods have diphtheria, tetanus, polio vaccinations, and we don't think twice about the impact of it. We are healthy, and we are where we are, and aging well, because we've had vaccines in the past to protect us. In the more recent past, and in my lifetime, certainly, I remember as a young doctor seeing a lot of children having meningitis and having throat infections or epiglottitis, which used to be fatal or serious for them, to be ending up in ITU. And during my training, we saw an awful lot of these children. And then came along the Hib vaccination, the Haemophilus influenza B vaccination. And now you don't see anybody with those conditions. The vaccines have been a real success, and they have been safe. People say, I'm not going to be injecting this into me because I don't know what's in it. Well, I think we know what all the vaccines have in them, and the new vaccines for coronavirus There's no pork, there's no beef, there's no animal products at all in the new Pfizer vaccine that in the manufacture. So it's different because it has been made out of made quite synthetically using what's called messenger RNA. So the other misconception is that it alters your DNA. So many of you will know what DNA and RNA is, many of you won't. But just to use a simple analogy, a mother will give birth to a child, but a child cannot give birth to a mother. So just think about that. So if you think the mother is the DNA and the child is the messenger RNA, the mRNA, then that is the situation we have at the moment. So there's no way that the messenger RNA vaccine can affect people's DNA because it's not possible. The second thing is that because it's a new way of making vaccines, it really actually has huge potential going forward in terms of cancer and all sorts of other diseases that it can treat. And so it really opens up a new way of developing medicines for the future. But for this vaccine, it's been because of this technology and a leap forward in science, and it has been a leap forward in science, and we've got this vaccine available to us. So we know from all the studies and all the scrutiny that's gone on, it is safe. We know that it is efficacious, so 95% efficacy in terms of how effective it is. And we know that it protects you getting serious coronavirus illness. Now, I had a patient of mine come and see me two weeks ago. And so I said to him, he was 85, and I said to him, so are you going to have the coronavirus vaccine when it's available? He says, oh no, he's not going to have it because there's no such thing as coronavirus. It's all made up. And there's no way he's going to have a vaccine because it does all these things to you. So I said to him, have you known anybody personally yourself who has had coronavirus or somebody who has died of coronavirus? And he said, no, to both. So I said to him, you're actually talking to somebody who has had coronavirus, who is seriously ill in bed for over 5 weeks. Seeing the inside of an ambulance is not much fun. Being on a drip in hospital is not much fun. Having difficulty breathing where your oxygen saturation is going down is not much fun. So I was explaining to him the symptoms that I'd gone through having had coronavirus. And his jaw dropped and he said, is that right, Doc? We've known each other for 30 years now. So you're telling me that you've had it. I'm going to think really differently about this now. Because as a GP, you build up a relationship with patients over a long period of time. And there's a position of trust in terms of the information that you give to people. And sometimes and often telling people stories about what real life and experiences is really helpful in terms of trying to influence their minds in terms of what they might do. So information is power. And so I think in this talk, really, I wanted to get over some of the basics relating to the Pfizer vaccine, which is available now, and we're vaccinating the over 80s, and then the care homes and the care home staff, and then it'll be going down in age groups as part of the national body's recommendation, and the vulnerable, and before you get right down to the younger people. So there is a science behind everything that is being done about the vaccine. And at this moment in time, I think over 9,000 people in Southwest London have already been vaccinated. In fact, yesterday, my uncle, who's 92, and my aunt, who's 90, actually went to have their coronavirus vaccination. I rang them up this morning thinking things, and because like any vaccine, you might have side effects. You might have a sore arm, might have a slight temperature, may feel a bit off, just like any vaccination. So I rang them with trepidation this morning, and lo and behold, neither of them had any symptoms. And I said, "Are you sure? Is your arm sore?" "No, nothing. Got no symptoms at all. Feels perfectly all right." And I think it's knowing people who've had the vaccine, knowing people who've had the disease, will help people understand why we need to do something about this in a big way, and how we need to protect ourselves and our families through use of the vaccination. So that's the Pfizer vaccination that's available now. And we'll have another vaccination, which is also an RNA vaccination, called the Moderna vaccination, that will be available soon. And we're waiting for the Oxford Zeneca vaccine. Now that works slightly differently. So it works in the normal way of taking a piece of the virus, but not the live virus, because you can't get coronavirus from any vaccine. And it creates, it's put into a vaccine which then generates antibodies, so that the next time you come across those spike protein antibodies generated by the coronavirus, if you get infected, it protects you against it. So we're waiting for that to pass its trials, be approved. It's gone through all its trials. And the numbers of people that have been involved in these coronavirus vaccine trials is over 100,000. And it's right across the board, because we know that there is a coronavirus has affected different people differently, and it's been disproportionately affected BME communities. So at least 41% of all the people in the clinical trials have been from different BME groups all over the world, including South Africa, South America, UK, Europe, and also in America. So there's been a huge number of countries being involved in these trials. And the reason why all these trials happened so much quickly is because all this red tape was removed and money was provided to find solutions. Because in a pandemic, you need to find solutions quickly. Otherwise, all that happens, and we got evidence of that now, is that we have continual lockdowns, and as soon as you remove the lockdowns, the virus comes back. Every country in the world is in the same position, and all of Europe is in lockdown as we are at this moment in time. But the story has changed in recent days, but it's actually in recent weeks, with the new variant strain of coronavirus. And what we know about the variant strain, which they think originated in Kent, is that it's more infectious. And the worry that everybody has, whether it's the government or the scientists at the moment, is because if it's highly infectious, you'll have more people getting infected. And if you've got more people getting infected, some of them are going to be people at risk, especially older people. And if you've got older people and more people at risk being infected, you're going to get more people ending up in hospital. So we know even in Croydon Hospital, numbers of cases have gone up, and they've gone up significantly in the last week, and in London and in all the areas that are in tier 4 at the moment. So the worry is that if we don't control this new variant, which is the major variant at the moment of the coronavirus, then our hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. So people say, so what does that matter? You know, we saw those scenes in Italy during the first wave where the hospital system was overwhelmed. But that's one thing in terms of if you've got coronavirus disease and you can't breathe and you need ventilators and oxygen and everything else. But the other part is that if the hospital system and the NHS is overwhelmed, all those other people who have problems like cancer or suspected cancer, or who need operations, or who have heart disease, who have strokes, they can't be looked after. So it's not only the people that have the infection that end up suffering, it's everybody else. So it's really important that we look at it as a whole, as a society, in terms of, you know, while we think about vaccination, while we think about coronavirus and how we control that, it is about everybody. And that's why I started this talk by saying we're all in it together, whoever we are, wherever we are. But together we can be strong, we can understand, we can use the information. It's important that people find information themselves. It's important that they feel comfortable with the information. It's important that people feel that they're confident in being able to have enough information to make the right decision, or to make decisions about having the coronavirus vaccine, because nobody's going to be compelled to doing that. But we need to get at least 70% of people taking the vaccine to have herd immunity, because it'll protect individuals. But to be able to protect society, you need to have enough numbers of people to stop the virus circulating. At this moment in time, if we don't have those numbers in terms of the community, then the virus will still circulate. There are things we don't know. So we don't know whether we can still be transmitting it in our noses despite having the vaccine. And studies are going on at the moment to see whether that's the case, because we still need to wear PPE. Remember, this virus is not even a year old, and so much is learnt about it. Now, there's another cohort of people that say, well, it's only mild illness. Young people in particular don't get a very serious illness. However, this new variant is affecting younger people and healthy people disproportionately as well at the moment. And it's a variant of the South African variant of the coronavirus that was seen before. So it will affect young people as much as older people. The other point is that younger people also get the virus. And it's not just you have the virus and you recover from it. You have what is called long COVID. Long COVID is a syndrome of conditions, whether it's related to mental illness, psychological illness, muscle pains, tiredness, and being unwell for a long time. And I can honestly say it's been 3 months since I had my infection of coronavirus, and I still have severe muscle pains. I still feel extremely tired at the end of the day, and tend to fall asleep. Hopefully I won't fall asleep this evening, but that's part of the syndrome, even though you recover from it, that people can have. So it's not just a simple disease, it's a complicated disease, and we're learning more about it all the time. But we do know that we can prevent people getting seriously ill by having the vaccine. And as we start rolling the vaccine out, I think hopefully, trying to answer your questions, then you'll have enough information to make the decision you're comfortable with.
Thank you, Doctor. Loads of information in there as well, and loads of questions have started. So I want to make sure there's enough time to for you to answer as many questions as possible. Also, can I also, if you are in the chat, you will notice somebody is replying back to your questions as well, and that is Nena. And Nena is I'm just going to make sure I read out her proper job title. Unless Nena, actually, can you introduce yourself if you can hear me?
No need for proper titles. My name is Nena Fuji. I am a hematologist. That means I look after people with blood disorders. I'm the medical director and deputy chief exec at Croydon Health Services, and I'm really delighted to be here today. I wait for Andrew to let me know how he wants me to approach. I'm happy to give a 5-10 minute brief conversation, and then happy to answer questions.
Okay, so what we're going to, there are some questions. A lot of people want to ask questions, so we're going to go into some questions and then we will come back to you as well. But I actually forgot to do the poll at the beginning. So somebody said, you forgot to do the poll. So I'm going to try and do the poll. There's 100 of us online at the moment, which is amazing. And loads of people trying to get in. So they're going to have to wait for part 2, which is next week, Tuesday at the same time. But I'm going to try this poll. And there's 2 questions right at the beginning, and then we will ask another 2 questions at the end as well. So let me try and see. You are logged in from another device. Your polling set. Okay. Epiphany, can you try and see if you can start the poll, because you logged in?
I've started it. Yeah.
Excellent. So if you can see the poll, everyone, can anybody see the poll? Or?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. If you can do the first two questions, Epiphany, then we will come back and do the next two questions at the end.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so please just fill in the first two questions, guys. Thank you.
I can't see that.
It doesn't allow you to submit if you just do the first two.
Yeah, I was just going to say you need to release the polls as two separate polls because you have to answer all questions to submit it.
Oh man. Oh man. Okay, so if we just do the first two questions, still answer the other four questions, but just don't answer them as anything in particular. So just the two first questions, and then we can come back to the other two later on, if that makes sense.
That's fine. We'll just have to minimize it until the end of the session.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works too.
Okay, so Lizzie, I'm going to come to you. If you can start looking at the first questions that have been popped up in the group chat. Yeah.
So I've been recording them from the beginning, so
Yeah.
that we don't miss people.
Okay, so just hold on for 2 seconds. Let the poll finish, and then we can.
Yeah, I'm still getting people to answer.
Excellent.
Sorry, I was too eager on my poll.
So Nana, if you would like to answer some of the questions as well that comes through as well once Lizzie answers the questions as well. Yeah. Okay.
Andrew, would you prefer for me to ask the people who asked the questions if they want to, verbalize it themselves?
No, if you can, and then yeah. If there's any other question, then we can.
Sure.
Okay, how are we doing with the poll, Epiphany?
44 of 98.
44 of 90. Okay, that's good.
Going up, yeah, 45%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while we're waiting, Nana, did you want to just let us know what the state of play in the hospital is?
Okay.
Yeah, I can do. So at this moment in time, we have over 100 patients in the hospital with COVID, 9 of whom are requiring ITU, so that's intensive care. And quite a number of them are requiring just under the level of intensive care, but significant treatment. I think one of the reasons Agnelo has asked this question is because for us, when you see what COVID can do and how it can take lives, this is a significant problem. And I remember speaking to one of the ITU nurses in wave 1, and this was after the peak of the wave had passed. I left in the corridor and she was in tears. She was a young Black woman, beautiful girl. And what she said to me was, when I looked around the ITU at one point, all I could see were people like me. And that really, really, really shocked her. I think it scarred her, to be honest. And so there is something about this condition we know that seems to affect really badly people who are older, people who are male, people who are from a BME background, people who are diabetic. And these are things that where it is within our gift, we need to try and do something about this. So it's really important we're here tonight talking about the vaccine. And I promised myself, I'm not here to persuade you. I'm here to inform you and educate you, because I think at the minute, I have a real concern that what people are hearing is only one side, very biased, unbalanced, and unvalidated information. You need to make informed choices for yourself, understanding the risk of what COVID can do in a BME population, in an elderly population, in a frail population, and think about what the alternatives are for you. So you need to be able to make an informed choice. And I hope we can answer some of your questions to help move that forward today.
Thank you very much, Nana. Okay, Epiphany, how are we doing with the poll?
55%, but I'm fine to end it now and then.
Yes, please. And can you give us the results? So for the first two questions.
So how likely are you to take COVID-19 vaccine? 34% said not likely at all. 25% said undecided. And 43% said, yes, I am waiting for my turn.
Okay, good.
Second question, how informed do you feel about the COVID-19 vaccine? 17% said not informed at all. 53% said okay, but need more info. And 32% said very informed.
Excellent, thank you very much. Can you just take a screenshot or a picture of those so that we can keep that, yeah? Lizzie, over to you with the first questions, please.
No problem. So basically, people have jumped in from the very, very beginning. So your John, he was the first guy with the question, well done. So his question was, if there's no certainty about immunity and that you can still catch COVID-19 after being vaccinated, what's the incentive for being vaccinated at all?
Do you want to kick off, Nana, or do you want me to answer?
I think
either way. What would you prefer, Agnelo?
I've been talking a lot, so I can let you do it. Yeah.
So it's actually a very good question. And I'm going to be able to say to you that some things I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend I know them. What I do know is that with the first COVID wave, one of the things we treated was the plasma, or the sort of water component of blood, with the antibodies of people who'd had it previously. And that was something that we used for the reason that antibodies can help. We know that from the vaccine trials, and this is on extensive numbers of people, that there is evidence of safety and efficacy in the short term, in the time that they have looked at the follow-up. And what that has demonstrated is that the risk of getting COVID and getting severe COVID and dying from COVID is reduced. I think Dr. Fernandes has already said there's not yet evidence to suggest the risk of transmitting it from a vaccine is reduced. So those are the things we know. It's not a simple question because immunity is a complex concept. Some of immunity is because of the ability of our white cells to fight infection directly. Some of immunity is due to the ability of our white cells to produce antibodies, which last for varying lengths of time. And there is a balance between those two that keeps us well. What we do know is that from really extensive trial work, this vaccine is reducing the risk of severe infection and death from COVID, and that we use the word convalescent plasma, that's plasma from people who are recovering, to treat COVID.
Other point to make is that once you have the virus, your body generates antibodies as well. But we also know that those antibody levels start to drop down and almost down to nothing by the time about 5 months later. So what the vaccine is trying to do is generate the right kind of antibodies that are going to survive longer, and also generate a T cell response. And the T cell response is going to be there longer. So the vaccine is actually going to generate a better immune response than just having the virus on its own. But the answer is we don't know. But the important thing is there has to be a time we didn't know about a lot of things, and we need to go on what we know at the moment. And at the moment, we know that it reduces people from dying and having serious illness. And actually, that is a powerful argument.
Thank you. Actually, Dr. Fernandes, you answered one of my own questions, which was, if our immunity drops after we've had COVID, then will the vaccine not surely do the same? So thank you. You've jumped ahead of my own question. So thank you. So we've got quite a lot of questions actually from Max. And so just thank you, Max, because you've given a lot of questions, which is brilliant. So one of the things he is concerned about is the fact that the RNA, because it's synthetic, is there any risk around that? Because it's new biotech. So it's never before used synthetic RNA into our body. He is very concerned about this. So I just he wonders if you can maybe explain a bit more about that.
Yeah. So as we've already said, over 100,000 people have been involved in the different trials. And in the Pfizer one, about 45,000 people have been involved in those trials and ongoing. And there's been no serious adverse effects because of the RNA. And they're being monitored continuously anyway. And there's been nothing that's shown up. And the only side effects that have been noted of seriousness have been severe allergic reactions. But those have been, in a very small number of people who had allergic axis anyway. So it's only people that had severe allergies that needed them to end up in hospital or are told that they need to carry an adrenaline pen or an EpiPen. Those are the only people that need to not have the vaccine. But otherwise, from the evidence and the numbers of people that have been trialed so far, there's no evidence that the synthetic mRNA causes any harm.
Brilliant, thank you.
Can I just, Lizzie, can I add to that a little bit? And I think it's probably reasonable to understand, and you're not alone, that many people are scared. And we're scared because this is something that's new and something that we don't have long-term data on. And that's because we're in a whole new world. Nobody expected to be here looking at a brand new virus in the midst of a pandemic. This is something that no one anticipated. So I think we have to appreciate that. And that means that we will not be able to say that we have 10 years worth of data. To compensate for that, what they have done is done the initial phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials on a large volume of people. So we have voluminous short-term evidence. I've had quite a few discussions because I have had to have conversations with myself about, is this the right thing to do? You do not have long-term evidence. Where is the balance of risk? And when I speak to some serious experts, they also say that having looked at vaccine production over the years, most of the side effects you see from vaccines, you tend to see in the short term. So that's one. We have given this vaccine to over 100,000 people, over 50,000 since the go live 2 weeks ago. So this is within the trial and out with the trial, 50,000 since then. And we're monitoring those people. And as Dr. Fernandes has said, only allergic reactions in people who already had an allergic tendency. But the conversation I had with myself was slightly different. And please don't laugh. There's so many things we do in life that include synthetic, horrible things that are manufactured for less positive reasons, such as I drink full-fat Coca-Cola. And I've admitted that in public, but there are things we do that are not good. This vaccine was designed specifically with a good intent and in a way to maximize safety. So that's one. Secondly, if you think about some of the things we go through by way of treatment for simple conditions, whatever new drug we have, whether it's for diabetes or hypertension, whether it's for cancer, they're all different drugs that have been produced through a safe, effective, and trialed mechanism. And that's the context in which we are. So remember, when we started with some of the cancer drugs that we are looking at now, they were new. And the time that it takes to go from, we used to call it bench to bed, from making something in the lab to using it has shortened over many, many years, so that some of those cancer drugs are really quite new and quite effective. And we've shown that they work with minimum side effects. So what we have been doing over the years is honing our processes of being able to manufacture something that is safe and efficacious. And I think that's really important to hear. So there is a balance of risk, but let's take that balance in an informed way.
Brilliant, thank you both of you. And so just moving on to the next question. It's not really doctor specific, so I completely understand if you're not comfortable to answer this, but there have been a few questions about it. So if the vaccines are safe, why do the vaccine makers have legal protection? Why is it that if, for instance, the question asker, if I get hurt, the vaccine makers are legally protected from taking responsibility? I want to know why it is that they can't be sued if it is as safe as basically we're saying.
So that's a bit more of a legal question, but it's released under emergency powers, given that we've got a pandemic on. So that's one thing in terms of having got through all the steps they needed to get through from a clinical point of view. But they haven't got through all the legal processes to not have that at the moment, because that would take more bureaucracy and more time to do. But from the clinic, has been deemed to be safe and efficient in the UK, in Europe, and in America. So from that point of view, for my personal, if I was going to take something, that's triple evidence that it's going to be safe and efficacious for me to take. In terms of the legal aspects, there is also about people giving the vaccine. So doctors and nurses giving the vaccines, as long as they follow the process that is set out approved by the government actually now, then there is no comeback in terms of if something happens. But as we said, the vaccine's been given hundreds of thousands of times now, and there has been negligible side effects or even serious reactions. So from that point of view, the evidence is building up that actually it is safe. And so, I think, given that it's a pandemic, we need to balance that risk in our minds. That there is no evidence of any serious side effects at the moment, but there is lots of evidence to suggest that the disease is nasty. It kills people. It gives people a serious illness, can give them long-term conditions, long-term sequelae at the end of it as well. So when you balance those risks, then you make a decision in terms of whether you take the vaccine or not.
Thank you. So the next one's very specific. It's from Lynn McGraw. She says, what allergies do you need to have in order for you not to be able to take the vaccine? So what allergies is it that people are having against the vaccine?
So this is a really important one. I was on a WhatsApp chat with a colleague of mine in Canada last night, and because his mother had been turned down for having a COVID injection because she had penicillin allergy. Now, penicillin allergy in itself is fraught with dangers because people say they're allergic to penicillin when they're not. So the only types of allergies we're talking about are allergies that result in anaphylaxis. In other words, a serious allergic reaction that means that you end up in hospital, and that you've been told you need to carry an EpiPen with you. So those are the serious, the serious allergic conditions relating to anaphylaxis, not just eczema or a reaction to foods or anything like that, which are minor. They're not the type of severe allergic reactions we're talking about here, and doesn't preclude you from having the COVID jab.
Brilliant, thank you. So our next one is from Miranda. She's worried about lymphedema. Is it safe to have the vaccine administered, and where can it be administered if you have lymphedema?
So I'll let Nana come into this, but I was thinking about this question. It's an intramuscular injection meant to be given in the deltoid in the arm. Yeah. As long as you can have access that, then there should be no reason why you can't have it. And secondly, lymphedema in itself is not a contraindication. Nena will correct me if I'm wrong.
No, absolutely correct. I was just emphasizing everything you said as you said it. So I'm sorry about the lymphedema, whoever's asked the question, but it is about using the arm that is not affected by lymphedema as far as possible. And because it's intramuscular rather than to do with the vascular system, then it shouldn't impact. And lymphedema, as you say, it doesn't stop you from having the vaccine.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Lizzie, there's two questions that's just been texted to me as well. So if I can just quickly jump in there, because you won't see these ones. Okay, first question. Has research been done into countries who have not had the vaccine but seem to be handling their numbers well, especially those with a high BAME population?
So can I come in here? That's a good question. Again, I will just start off by saying I don't know, because a lot of the progress around research has been in countries where you have access to move at pace with the sort of research. So I don't have an answer for that. I'm also really conscious that there are other countries where the reason we report rates. So I'm always conscious that, you listen to Germany and how they're handling, and you listen to China originally, and those results were influenced as much by how much testing we did in the beginning and how willing people were to go and have those tests done. What I will say about trials in general, it's more about, and this is a horrible statement, so I need to be careful how I say it, people would wonder more about starting the trials in non-humans and then migrating to humans. And once you have the evidence in humans, you have the evidence for a population. So with other drugs, for example, we don't say we're only going to test, if we have to test every single person in the world to be able to say that this new blood pressure tablet is good to go. We know that it can work as long as we've tested a broad population. And remember as well that we are a global village. I don't think there's anywhere, particularly in London, where you'd go down the street, and particularly in Croydon, and you're not really testing a little bit of all bits of the world. So I'm not sure that we need to be asking that specific question about where we've tested it. I'm not sure that we have the same access to testing, but what I am sure of is that we have tested a huge volume of people, and that has been representative of many different populations, not completely so. I still think the majority of the trials initially were in a non-BME population, but there are BME people within that trial population, and there have been significant numbers in the post-trial release, so in the 50,000 people who've been vaccinated since. So we have a good body of evidence around a representative population that should give us some comfort. I hope that kind of addresses the underlying question.
And can I just add, there's also practical issues about giving the type of vaccines that we got available at the moment in countries like in Africa or Asia, because you need to keep them at -70°C, and so they're very fragile, and the infrastructure in different countries are not conducive to be able to give the vaccine in the current way. That's why we need to wait for the next generation of vaccines, like the Oxford AstraZeneca one, which is much more easy to give in bigger populations where the infrastructure is not there. So that's another issue in terms of why it's not being used in different countries. But on the same note, there's a question in the chat that is saying, and maybe Nina can answer that. Can one of our clinicians speak on the conundrum around how people of Black ethnicity respond to treatments differently, e.g. ventilation in ICU settings? Our body's metabolic response when we hit sepsis episodes, ED, etc. Nina has already alluded to this. Do you want to expand on it?
What, Agnelo, did you want to check the hardest question and send it my way? Was that deliberate? Okay, so really good question. There's a lot on this, and I am learning a lot more about this. So I'm going to start off with something I learned from Professor David Williams from Harvard, who does a lot on diversity and ethnicity. And he speaks about the fact that our bodies undergo quite a few changes in response to small challenges in our environment. He talks about microaggression. So when we talk about racism being something that is toxic, evidence that there's actually an impact on our physical well-being as well. So I think that's something to appreciate. Secondly, there are many different aspects to responses. And I would say there are three main things. One is around genetics. So we know, for example, that certain conditions are more prevalent in BME people, and those conditions include things like sickle cell disease, for example. The other factor would be environmental, and that includes things like diet. So for example, and I grew up in the Caribbean with Nigerian parents, so rice is a staple for me, and I know that's not necessarily long-term going to do me well. I also know that there's a tendency, and I remember my renal colleague talking about salt content as something that increases the risk of hypertension. So we have genetics, we have environmental, and we have behavior. And I think we must not underestimate behavior and how we have chosen to respond and how we normalize various things. So for example, one of the things I'm interested in is what the difference in presentation has been. So there was one point where the diagnosis of mental health conditions was more prevalent amongst people who were Black, and in particular Black men. And part of that was because of the cultural norms. Some of those cultural norms include not presenting when you're unwell because you can tough it out. And some of that means that when you do present, often it's later and you're sicker. So there are a number of factors that are relevant. Those factors in working in concert actually then impact things like, we know that diabetes can be more common in an Asian population. We know that there may be a higher risk of stroke in a BME population because of a background hypertension, which is often diagnosed late. Those are some things which are not just because of genetics. They're not just because of behavioral or cultural. It's a combination of all of the above. And that's probably what the risk. When we look at the people we saw in IT, people I saw in IT, it was a proportion of diabetes. There was a high proportion of hypertension and kidney disease. There was increased risk of obesity and then age. So there was a whole constellation of things that meant that people from a BME background.
I think we might have... Oh. Doctor, are you still there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's better. Yeah, you sound better now.
Yes. Okay.
Do you want to finish?
There's so many factors that. Yeah, we have a predilection to certain conditions. Our behaviors may be different. There may be other genetic factors, all of which add up. I don't think COVID is about genetics because I haven't seen the distribution internationally that one would expect if this was purely about genes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Doctor. So we've got 30 minutes left. So I really want to try and go through as many questions as possible. I'm going to hand back to Lizzie, but there is one that I also want to know as well, Doctor. So let me try and get my question in. And I think you might have mentioned it already, but will the vaccine work against the new variant of the COVID-19 spreading across the UK at present? And I say that as well because, as we know, we've done the flu vaccination recently as well. And we've had that talk, and you've said that the flu vaccination changes every year because the variant changes as well. So my question to you is that if they've now created a new vaccination, the new vaccine, and it was
another very good question,
and it was for this, but now we've been told that there's a new variant, how can that variant, one that we created in October, be okay for the one that we've done in December? So that's a question that has come up, and I would love for you guys to answer on that one.
So I think it is an excellent question.
Agnelo.
Yeah, and the evidence is at this moment in time they're doing more studies to confirm that, but the evidence they have given in terms of how they've made this vaccine and how they've got the genome for the new variant as well. They know that it will be effective for this for the new variant as well, because of the changes in the genome, in the genetics of the new variant, and how the current vaccines were made. But they're doing studies as we speak to confirm that. But the evidence is that it should do, because of the way it's been made. Is that correct, Nina?
Absolutely, that's my understanding. It would be really good to get affirmation, and they're doing studies to do that. But at the minute, and again, I went and spoke to a virologist. The understanding is that it should provide some cover. Just to go a little bit further, you're right to make the analogy to flu. And what I would talk about is drift and shift. So we expect viruses to mutate, and they will do so in little steps, And then there may be a significant step where you think, okay, that's where you probably need to have a new vaccine approach. And that's why we do that with flu every year. And so at the minute, from what I have been told, there seems to be a drift, but not necessarily a shift. And the expectation is that the vaccine should continue to provide cover, but we need to test that and prove that and affirm that.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to hand back to Lizzie and to Epiphany as well. So Epiphany, I know you had some questions which were sent in to us before today's event, but if you can start working with Lizzie for the next 28 minutes to try to get as many questions as possible to our doctors while we've got them online. So Lizzie, over to you.
Cool. Well, I will pass to you soon, but I just wanted to ask this question because it followed on perfectly to the flu, which was, will the COVID vaccine need to be taken just once, or will it be needed to taken every year, just like the flu?
The answer to that is we don't know yet.
Brilliant.
So it's no point me saying I know the answer when we don't know the answer.
Yeah, one second. Absolutely.
So yeah, over to you, Epiphany, because I do know that people took the time to email in before this.
Can I just pick up a question in the chat, which I think is a really important one, and this is about pregnancy. And so they say that if you're going to try and get pregnant, you shouldn't do that within 2 months of the COVID vaccine. In the trials, there have been people that were pregnant, but they had the vaccine, and they're monitoring those people, but they don't think that it's going to have any long-term effects relating to pregnancy either. So it's an important question to ask. Because it's all so new, they're just being cautious, but it's not anticipated there will be any. And the only reason they brought up the issue of pregnancy is because there hasn't been enough information yet. But it's not anticipated there will be any. If people got pregnant after having the COVID vaccine, that there will be any problems. But remember, we're vaccinating the over 80s at the moment, and I don't think they're going to get pregnant. And it's going to be a long time before anybody who is going to be likely to be pregnant is going to be vaccinated, because there's a whole cohort of people to do. So by that time, we will have more information about this as well, because the only people that we do know that were related to of childbearing age were in the trials, and they're being followed up as we speak.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And I'm just going to go through some of the questions that we had before sent in to us as well. So the first one I'm going to do, which is kind of, I guess, more of a general question, but with so much fake news being spread about the virus and vaccines, how can the public make an informed decision about whether to take the vaccine or not?
You know what? It is actually really hard. And I actually, I'm finding this situation difficult. And I do need to share with you all that I have taken my time to make my decision about the vaccine. And at the very beginning, if my father, who is 75 and diabetic, I would have had him first in line. And for me, anyone who is in a high risk situation, there's a balance of risk and benefit because we don't have long-term data. And so I understand the fear and the hesitation. I had my COVID vaccine yesterday. I had intended to wait until everyone at high risk had theirs first before I had mine, but they were running out of slots and there was vaccine that would have been wasted. So I had mine yesterday. And I did that because I sat and I looked and I saw the evidence on a short-term basis, granted, about safety and effectiveness. I did that because for me, at this moment in time, there's nothing else that I know that's out there that can effectively treat this condition. I did that because I have at least one risk factor for this. I have many others that are not, but that was a decision I could make for myself. And the one thing when I came tonight, I wanted to share with everyone was that you need to get knowledge and information, and you need to question. And questioning us tonight is really important. I don't care how hard the question is, ask the question. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know. But what is terrible is for people to be making decisions based on wrong information. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's a lot of that abounding. And so I really have sympathy. We're very happy to continue sessions like this to make sure whatever information we have, the evidence we have, we share with you. And when I look at evidence, just so you know it, because I am a cynic, I have to have it triangulated. So I don't just want one set of information coming at me. I want another and a third. And I want to be able to see for myself that this works. That's a conversation I can have with myself. Each and every one of you needs to have a conversation with yourself. But I can only share the information we have from the evidence to date on this vaccine. I can also share the evidence we have around the condition. And I can also share the number of people I have seen who should not have been in a position to have lost their lives, but because COVID has afflicted, we've been in that position. So I know that is a fact. That's my known. I know the short-term benefits of the vaccine. That's my known. My unknown is about what the long-term effects are. But I know that we've done a huge volume of people in a short period of time. I know that we have gone through all the right steps to make sure this is done right. I know that the design was something that was pre-considered. I know that I have got regulatory sign-off. These are the things I know. And so I keep having that conversation with myself. It took me some time. I had my vaccine yesterday. You need to make a decision for yourself, but based on accurate, valid information.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's what I started off this conversation by saying, that it's about finding out the right sources of the information. So I think 2 months ago, I was asked, will I have the COVID vaccine when it's out? And the answer I gave was no. And the reason I gave the answer is no, I wouldn't have it, is because I didn't have enough information to make a decision for myself. And the information wasn't around 2 months ago, but you know, now the information is around, and that's what helps convince us as doctors as well, and nurses and health professionals, that this is the right thing to do. So information is power, as I said before, and it's important to get the right information from the right sources. And actually, think for yourself in terms of what would be the right answer for you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, doctors, we have about another 50 questions for you. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do this in the next 22 minutes, but over to Epiphany and Lizzie.
Yeah, sorry, I'll go through this next one. Do you guys know the effectiveness, and does this effectiveness differ for people of different ages, racial backgrounds, genders, and other differences as well? So mainly just the effectiveness of it.
So again, it's gone through all the regulators, and we know that the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine is 95% efficacious. So the evidence is overwhelming, and it's even better than they anticipated. And the Oxford vaccine, I think it's around 52% with the first dose, and just around 90% of the second dose. But to get the immunity that we need, you only need between 50 and 60% anyway. So they're doing better than expected, which is real positive.
I just wanted to jump in and just let everyone know that if we don't get to your question, either one that you've emailed in or put in the chat, that Epiphany has your emails, and I am recording every single one of the questions put in the chat. So we will, unfortunately for both doctors, we will obviously ask anything that hasn't been specifically answered. But if your question is similar to something that has been answered, we may not get back to you. So
part 2 as well. Let them know about part 2 and part 3, please.
All right, so I'll go ahead now. So we will be having a second COVID discussion on the 29th of December, and we will also be having a third discussion on the 5th of January. Don't ask me the times yet, as they are being confirmed, because obviously we have to book in the speakers, and they are generously giving their time throughout this Christmas period. So please do keep an eye on your emails and on our WhatsApps and on our website. So we will have not just one more, but 2 more sessions. Sorry, Epiphany, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just going to the chat now as well, because a lot of the questions that were emailed in, you guys have already answered, which is amazing. But a lot of people I've seen have been asking about, if you've already had COVID, do you still need to take the vaccine? Can you still spread it after you've had the vaccine? Yeah, can you guys give more clarity around that, please?
Can I just first ask, in terms of the audience, I don't know how you want to do this, but how many of you on this call have actually had COVID? Are there any hands or reactions going up?
So in Zoom, we don't have a hands up so much, but you can put a little reaction up. So you can do a little clapping hand or a thumbs up. So if everyone could click on that if you have had COVID.
It's going to be a bit hard to manage on that one, but maybe people can put it actually in the chat, and then we can kind of say a yes or no. We can put it into the chat and see what comes through.
You see, they can do it in the participants. They can raise their hand.
Oh yeah.
In previous Zooms, I know that some people don't know how to do that, and it takes too long to explain. So far, I've looked on the chat and what people are putting up on the screen, and it looks like 2 people have definitely had it. But I do know that, talking on behalf of the Asian Resource Centre, that we unfortunately know of a lot of people that have had it. And personally, I know people that have not just had it, but have passed away from it. So it is everywhere. But some people are just lucky and haven't witnessed it, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat about and maybe Nena can answer this, is they dump anything in the COVID box if they test positive after death. So in other words, the data that comes out when they say the number of deaths every day, where people have tested positive in the last month.
So I think that, yeah, that there are a number of facets to this. Again, I'll just share my experience. I don't have all the information in life, but in the first wave of COVID, we started off where we were able to test everyone who came into hospital. And so if you passed away in hospital from COVID, we would know that you died from COVID. We didn't have as many tests for people in the community who didn't come into hospital who may have died from COVID. And so I don't think we captured the death rate at its peak in wave 1. We have been very, very clear about what goes on a death certificate, and there are people who can die from COVID and there are people who can die with COVID. So you may have died from something else, but you have COVID, and so it goes on a different section of the death certificate. It's important. It has always been important. It will always be important that we capture as much information as we can about a person, both their direct cause of death and anything else that may not have caused the death, but may have contributed to their illness and their state of well-being or not. So it is important we capture all of that on the death certificate, and that is what we've done. Our death certificates are scrutinized regularly for those purposes. In terms of putting COVID on after someone has died, it is possible that you have a test sent before someone dies. They die, and then you get the result after they've died. And so you're able to understand the cause after the event rather than before. That is not unheard of. It's not unique to COVID. It could be the same with any blood results. Calcium level can come back later, potassium level can come back later, and then you update the certificate based on what you inform the certificate based on what you know. So that is not unique. I think it's easy to look with skepticism and cynicism for things that are wrong, and there will be things that are wrong. Let's not pretend, but these are custom and practice that is well established for good reason. So there's nothing in that suggests otherwise. The last thing to say is that although we've had a number of people who survived COVID, they may go on because of the consequences of having had COVID to pass away. And it's important we also get that information because it makes us understand truly the total burden of COVID. We've always done that for anyone who dies. In the hospital, we look at the death rate in hospital, and we always look at the death rate 30 days after you've been discharged, because it's easy for us to think, oh, we didn't have anything to do with that. But absolutely we did, because that is the care that they had or the treatment they had, and the consequence of that will be absolutely pertinent in the first 30 days. So nothing suspicious in that practice at all.
Thank you. And as somebody who's had COVID, and there was, I can say that I will be having the COVID jab for the reasons we explained earlier, because my immunity will be going down and will be down to nothing by the time 5 months. And it may not be the right kind of antibodies either. So we know that the immune response that the vaccination gives, both the antibodies and the T-cell response, actually protects. So from that point of view, I will be taking the COVID vaccination.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Lizzie?
Yes.
And yep, let's try and get through these questions on the question and answers as soon as.
Okay, so someone who is asking, is it safe? Is the vaccine safe for people with cancer, bearing in mind that there are so many types of cancer?
Sorry, Nella, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nena.
So there are so many different types of cancer. And for me, one of the things I would say to anyone is if you're in doubt, speak to your treating specialist, because it's not just about the different types of cancer. There's also about the state of treatment you're in, if it's active, if it's not. The answer would be yes, but I would always want you to check it with your specialist to make sure. And I've had a number of my patients come and ask me that question, and I've been able to individually tell them where I think they should go with that.
Yeah. And then the other was, can you take the vaccine if you've got multiple sclerosis? The answer is yes. So that was a simple answer.
Brilliant. So hopefully a simple answer to this one as well. Aren't there natural remedies to boost our immune system? Why the need for a vaccine?
Now this is a really interesting one, because the number of natural remedies I've been told to take has been incredible. And, you know, the ginger, the turmerics and everything else is not going to protect you against coronavirus. No is just, and even the vitamin D is not directly associated with it. So we know that food and vitamins and everything else that you may take is not going to stop you getting infected with the virus. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Nena?
So I would say this one thing. So this comes back, and we did a few sessions around flu myth busting. And one of the things is around, you know, a viral infection is caused by a virus. And so, you know, the way to deal with that is to deal with the virus itself, or to not get it. But it is important that you look after yourself. So keeping yourself well and boosting yourself as best you can is important, because it means that you're in a stronger position to fight not just this virus, but any other virus. So I'd always say to just keep yourself well. My mom was a fan of ginger. She used to send me little notes, ginger, turmeric. When it came out, she would send me a little note about turmeric. And I would just say, you know, as long as it didn't hurt me, I had no issue with it. But you again need to have that conversation with your physician. And I'm also conscious that many of our treatments have origins in plants. But in terms of the vaccine and treatment for virus, none of these things is going to treat it. These are things about how you keep yourself well and put yourself in the best position, not just for COVID, for flu and for everything else that's out there.
Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Nena, I'm glad somebody's mentioned that, because as you know, in the BME community, or may I say even the Black community, you know, a lot of people do believe in the herbs and taking this and taking that as well. So I don't know if you could maybe explain a little bit more as well, because you know, the people are saying that as well, and we've heard it in as you said, not even just about the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, just about everything as well. So I think you did touch on it, but can you maybe just give us a little bit more, especially as said in the Black community, everyone does think about going the natural way and not the way down the doctor's way.
Wow. Okay. So why am I getting all the hard questions tonight? Agnelo, you're going to have to help me in a minute.
I'll help you in a minute.
I would always say, I've had years and years of training to be able to say, I can look at the evidence and say, you know, this works. I've seen it work in this percentage of people, etc. And where there is evidence, that helps, whether that's evidence about conventional therapy or non-conventional therapy. The difficulty with some of the non-conventional therapy, all our herbs and things, is that we don't have a lot of evidence. So it's difficult for us to say with any sort of impunity that those things definitely work. What I've always said to my patients is, as long as it does no harm, I have no problem with it. And I think that's really important. Secondly, I wouldn't whitewash and say that it absolutely cannot do anything beneficial, because I know that many of our conventional treatments have their origin in herbs. So there may be some benefit to it, but we haven't got the evidence. And so I'm not, as I said with everything else, I'm not going to stand here and say I know something when I don't know it. If there is evidence and that's useful, then that's helpful. For me, the bigger question is about how you keep yourself well. And if you are interested in using some herbal remedy, I've had to Google various bits and pieces to see if they interact with some of the drugs I have my patients on, to make sure that you do it safely more than anything else. I don't know the wealth of things that is out there. There's some dodgy things, as well as there may be some relevant things, and you need to be careful. And with everything we're saying to you tonight, make sure you're informed.
Yeah,
Agnelo.
yeah, a healthy diet there's nothing that can beat a healthy diet with fresh fruits and vegetables and a mixed diet. I think it's really important. Just in terms of recipes, usually with turmeric in it, and turmeric is a big is used widely in Asian populations, and it's got lots of symptoms that it's supposed to help with. And whether it does or not, I think the evidence base is not necessarily there. A lot of people feel better, and if they feel better and it's not doing any harm, then there's no reason why they can't take it. And in fact, it's the most popular treatment for a lot of things among Asian people. So but in terms of preventing you getting COVID infection, then the answer is quite clear. It's not going to prevent you getting COVID infection, because COVID infection is a virus. And if you've got the virus infected, you're going to get the disease. If you're in a fit state because you've been living a good life, a healthy life, then you're going to be able to overcome it quicker. But if you've got underlying conditions, it's still not going to help from that point of view.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, we've got 8 minutes left. So Lizzie and Epiphany, let's go for it.
Cool. So can I just ask for basically one sentence answers to a few here? So I have heard some volunteers to this vaccine suffered from Bell's palsy. Is this true?
Not that I've heard of, unless Nena has, but I haven't. I've not seen it in the literature either.
Nor have I, but I'm happy to go and have another look. I'm not familiar with that at all, no.
Okay. If you're young, healthy, have no underlying health issues, you exercise, etc., is it right to not take the vaccine?
The answer is when your age comes up in terms of the age groups they're recommending for vaccination at the moment, then you've got to think about that, and that's going to be quite a long way down the line anyway. But we've got a new variant, and the new variant is infectious, and the new variant seems to be more infectious with young people and healthy people. So I think that needs to also be taken into account. But that decision, you're not going to be offered the COVID vaccine anytime soon in the next few months. So you've got time to think about that one. But
Yeah.
But the evidence is that young people and healthy people are going to be affected disproportionately with the new coronavirus variant.
Brilliant. So very broad question, but a sentence if you can. What is the situation with children and the vaccine?
So whenever there's a new vaccine that comes out, children will be the last group of people that we would target is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. We would treat. So it will not, I don't think, initially be used on children. Similarly for pregnant women, we'll see what the future brings. We have to watch this space. And
the trials were conducted in 16 and over. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about children, you talk about below 16. It hasn't been. Trials haven't been done on them, but 16 and over trials have been done, so they have been safe and effective in that age group.
Brilliant. So this next one is quite a tricky one, but yeah, again, quick. Why didn't masses get COVID during the BLM marches?
So I think, Lizzie, I think I tried to answer this. There's not a one sentence answer to this one. I don't know. So I don't know how many people attended. I don't know how young they were. I don't know how many were tested. I don't know how many got it and were never tested. I don't know how many got it and never presented. We don't know because none of that is known. So it's, they could have all gotten it for all we knew, but they were all asymptomatic and well. It's very difficult to make any comment on that.
Brilliant. So next one, I am taking blood thinning drugs. Is there any side effects with taking the vaccine?
I'm taking that one. I'm a hematologist. I can do that one. So we had to address this one early on, and it doesn't mean you can't have the vaccine. Depending on what you're on, we just need to make sure that your levels are stable enough for us to have it, and then we put additional pressure on before you leave. So it doesn't mean you can't have it. Speak to your doctor, and we can have a look at that for you.
Yeah, and the person who wrote the guidelines for that is our young Nena over there.
Way. Good. All right, and then so this one, why aren't all of the rough sleepers and homeless suffering with COVID? This person's seen lots of people on the streets not wearing masks at all. They've certainly not been social distancing, but they're walking around like it's a regular day. Shouldn't separate studies be done on them? What are they doing right?
So I think I'm going to come back to, we don't know what we don't know. So you don't know how many of them have had COVID, have come into hospital, have passed away, have been asymptomatic, have been seriously ill. We don't know that. So it's really hard for us to assume that actually they're doing something right. And again, I always look at people, and what you see on the surface doesn't tell you about what's going on underneath. So I don't think we can make that assumption.
And the other point is, we asked the question, how many people on this call had COVID? And if you're looking at 2 or 3 people out of 100, then it's not that prevalent in terms of certain groups. So I think we don't know the answer, but it's probably more complex.
And tracking off of what you've just said as well, I think a lot of people were asking about, there's a 90% recovery rate for COVID. It's a mild illness, so why should we vaccinate everyone, and why take the risks for vaccinating everyone?
So I think I covered that in my initial talk. So yes, it is 1% of the population will get it. People are going to be disproportionately ill if they're because of age or underlying health conditions. Now, if those numbers of people overwhelm the NHS, it affects everybody. So it's not a COVID health service; it's a national health service. But it only takes one cohort of people that take up the beds, and you've got to take beds out because of keeping infection control. You reduce the number of beds. You've got the hospitals being full. They can't do all the other things they need to do. General practice and the rest of the system gets bogged down with just the coronavirus. What about people with cancer, suspected cancer, heart disease, stroke, diabetes? All the other things that are non-COVID related get affected as well. So that's the reason why, by controlling this virus, by preventing spread of it through a vaccine, we're protecting everybody, not just the people with COVID.
Thank you.
Lizzie, can I jump in just a second? And Cliff's asked a question. Why vaccinate everyone? Do remember that the advice on vaccination comes from the JCVI, and what they've asked us to do is to look at the most vulnerable people first. That is our approach. So the over 80s, those in care homes, etc. So that is our approach to vaccinating people as far as possible. Those people who are most likely to succumb if they got COVID.
Okay, everyone, it's 8 o'clock. But before we go, Epiphany, can you get the poll ready for everyone? And then doctors, can I ask you just to sum up while we're doing the poll as well, just your advice to everyone as well. I think if we take about a minute on doing the poll, Epiphany, just tell me, is it up already?
Yes, it's up now.
Okay, so can I just, while we're doing the poll, if you can just answer the last 2 questions. The first 2 we're already done. Now just answer the last 2 questions. And Dr. Agnelo, just your advice, for everyone, and Dr. Nana as well, your last few words as well.
Yeah, so thank you for taking your time out to come to the call today. And I'll end with what I started with, is that we're all in this together, and together we can keep our families and our communities safe, because together we're strong, and together we will beat this virus, and vaccination is part of the armory to help us do that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agnelo. Dr. Nana.
So I always reference my parents because they were incredible people. My mom was an incredible person. My dad is an incredible person. And they always said, you know, knowledge is power. And they invested heavily in our education. I would really encourage every single person, thank you for all your wonderful questions, to just spend a bit of time getting information, challenging the information, and making the best decision for you and your families. That's your personal choice, but what would be a travesty is making a decision based on faulty data. Yeah. Please, 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 education is absolutely key. And anything I can do to help and to answer more questions. I've really enjoyed some of these questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Epiphany, can we have the results, please?
Yeah, so for after the workshop, do you feel more informed? 76% said yes.
Wow.
And would you come to another session about COVID-19? 96% said yes as well.
Excellent. Well done, everyone. And just to finish off, I've just seen some of the comments in the chat room, and I'll maybe ask the two doctors to look as well. But it's, you know, thank you, useful information. Thank you for being so honest. We've learned a lot. It's really, really positive quotes as well. So once again, thank you to Dr. Agnelo for spending the last hour and a half with us. Thank you to Dr. Nana for spending the time, but also answering all the questions in the chat as well. Can I also thank my two co-hosts as well, Lizzie and Epiphany as well, for being wonderful, wonderful hosts with us as well. And can I just remind everyone that we will be posting this on our YouTube channel. So please search in about 3 or 4 days on YouTube, Croydon BME Forum. And if you're not a member of the BME Forum yet, please go to our website and register on the membership page so that you can get as many, more of these workshops and more information in the next week. And once again, part 2 would be the 29th of December. I think that's going to be at 6:30. And the 5th of January, the time to be arranged as well. So once again, thank you everyone for coming and spending the last hour and a half with us. And hopefully we will see you next week on the 29th. Book your tickets and come early, because there were people wanting to join us and they couldn't get in today. So thanks everyone, and have a happy Christmas.